What up, you fluffy bastards? My name is Liquid Blitz, and today we're going to be discussing and looking in detail at the next DLC weapon from the first DLC, They Shall Not Pass. We're going to be taking a look at the LMG. And I've researched how to pronounce this one this time. It's pronounced Chauchat. 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 No T at the end. As with the first DLC weapon video, I'm going to go into a very detailed stats comparison with the most similar weapons, and afterwards I'll give you a summary of all the pros and cons, and how I feel about the weapon in general. If you want to skip to a certain part of the video, use the annotations on screen or the timestamps in the description, which I've just started adding to my videos, because not everybody wants to listen to all of this shit. Now, before we do get into the stats, a little history lesson on the Chauchat. It's always interesting to know the history of a weapon, so I thought I'd include it. First things first, it was named after its main contributor, Colonel Louis Chauchat. I feel like such a knob pronouncing French words. I don't even know if that's correct. That's what all the pronunciation websites said it was. Chauchat. Chauchat! Anyway, it was used by the French army between 1916 and 18, so the second half of World War I. And over 100,000 of these were used by the French military on the front lines. And even more than that were used by many other armies, mostly the United States. I've written this down, I'm never going to remember these countries. Mostly the United States, but also Poland, Belgium, Italy, Finland, Greece, Russia, Romania, Serbia, Bulgaria. Seriously, this light machine gun was a mainstream beast of a weapon, and it was one of the first light machine guns to be used by a single person. It was designed to be used by a single person. And the last little point of history, mass production resulted in cheap, unreliable builds. They were making so many of these things that the quality of construction was sort of being sacrificed by using cheap metal parts, which meant that in reality it often jammed and sort of overheated. Now, I don't personally know that much about LMGs or guns in general, but apparently the Chauchat would literally not fire if it overheated. It wouldn't work. So, shit, man. Can you imagine being on the front lines and your gun just wouldn't work? Anyway, that's enough history, and I know most of you didn't come here for the history. So, let's start comparing some stuff. Now, before I get into the stats, I'm going to do something which I didn't do for the last video, and I'm going to show you a side-by-side comparison of all the low-weight weapons, iron and AA sights. Now, why am I showing you this? Look at the size of the Chauchat's AA sight. Just so you know, every one of these 10 sights that you can see on the screen are the same zoom and aspect level. So they are all the same size in-game, sort of relative to each other. I haven't made it any bigger. Look how big the AA sight is for the new Chauchat low weight. Personally, I think that is awful. I'm a big fan of AA sights, I really am. I prefer AA sights to iron sights, but that is too big for my liking. It's literally twice the size of any other AA sight. The iron sights for the Chauchat are much better. Keep in mind that storm weapons also have AA sights, but that would just be too many to put on the screen at the same time, so I'm only showing the low weight weapons sights. A bit irrelevant on the topic, but if I had to choose a favourite AA sight and iron sight from these, I think the MG15 wins hands down on both counts. It's the most clear with sort of the most negative space around the sight itself. The Madsen and Lewis gun are probably the worst for both sides because they cover much more of the screen, especially the Madsen, which, like the Automatico, has that stupid magazine pointing upwards. I mean, when choosing a weapon, people tend to get, and I'm guilty of this myself, people tend to get caught up on the stats more than anything else, and they don't really consider things like the sight. The sight can make such a huge difference to playstyle. I mean, in my opinion, looking at the difference between these sights, I'd say a better sight is worth a little knock in all the rest of the stats, to be honest. Gameplay and facecam reappear now! Anyway, time for the hardcore stats! Now, unlike the first weapon I covered, the Chauchat has two variants, low weight and telescopic, but what a lot of people don't realise is that the variants only change one or two stats between them. All the other stats are the same. Now, specifically with the low weight and telescopic, the only differences are that the low weight has a much better sort of recoil and spread decrease. So the low weight weapons recover their aim better after shooting, and of course they use iron sights and AA sights. And the telescopic variants simply have a better spread, making it more accurate at long range. And they also have a scope which can go up to 4 times zoom as well. Those are the only differences between the low weight and the telescopic versions. Other than that, all the stats are the exact same. So keeping that in mind that there's very little difference, I'm only going to compare the low weight version to other low weight weapons because there's more low weight weapons than there are telescopic weapons. So it's a better comparison. And I'm not going to do both telescopic and low weight because that would be too many weapons on the screen, too much detail. I'm already going into too much detail. So we're comparing the Hewitt, the Madsen, the MG15 and the Lewis gun. And on the end in glorious colour is the Chauchat. Now, a lot of numbers are going to start appearing on your screen, so I'm not going to take too long discussing each one. The first stat is damage, and this is possibly the strongest point of the Chauchat. The Chauchat has a massive damage of 35 maximum and 23 minimum. Now, all the rest do 23 maximum. That's the comparison here. It does so much more damage. The Chauchat's minimum damage is the maximum damage for all other LMGs. That is insane. All the others do 23 maximum, and the MG15 and Lewis do 15 minimum, and the Madsen and Hewitt do 17.5. And they just don't compare to the 23 minimum of the Chauchat. Now, the next stat, the range, does dampen the damage a little bit, but it doesn't make that much difference, if any, to be honest. And that is because it has a lower range than all the other LMGs, slightly. It does its maximum to 10 meters, and then it drops down to its minimum at 40 meters. Now, you can see all the others, their maximum stops at 11 meters. And they go to 46, 42, 42, 46. So their damage lasts for a bit longer. But the damage of the Chauchat is so high that range really doesn't make any difference. Now, the next stat is fire rate. Now, it's ironic that this gun is called the Chauchat, because its fire rate is shit. Fire rate is 359, which is slow for an automatic weapon, compared to 475, 540, 500, and 480. I mean, all the other LMGs are faster by a safe margin. So yeah, it fires very slow. Now, that's the most negative point, to be honest. But as we'll sort of discuss a little later, that is mitigated a lot by all of its strengths. It doesn't really matter that it shoots slow. The next stat, and also another negative, is the mag size. It only has a mag size of 20, compared to 26, 31, 100 for the MG15, and 47 for the Lewis gun. Now, because it shoots so... Don't be put off by the 20-round mag. Because it shoots so slowly, that 20 lasts longer than it sounds like it would. Do you see what I mean? Because it shoots so slowly, it actually fires, if I'm correct, it fires for longer than the Hewitt and the Madsen, even though that has 26 and 31. That's the positive of having a slow fire rate. The small mag size lasts for longer. Next, we have the reload times, and these are generally positive for the Chauchat. When you have bullets left, it has a 2.9 second reload, which is a little bit slower than a couple of the weapons, but generally a very good time. But when the gun is empty and you reload, it has the fastest reload time of all the LMGs, so that's a really good positive. The next stat is the first shot recoil multiplier. Now, again, as I mentioned in the last video, in case you didn't know, your first shot, if you're firing automatically, your first shot has an extra bit of recoil added to it, and this is determined by the first shot recoil multiplier. Now, as you're about to see in a minute, the recoil is actually shit, so the fact that it has the lowest first shot recoil multiplier of all the low-weight LMGs, that's a very good thing, because it needs a low multiplier, to be honest. And that is because the next stat, the vertical recoil... by the way, all stats from this point on are basically just arbitrary sort of units. Basically, the lower, the better from this point on. Now, the vertical recoil in 0.55, that is the highest of all low-weight LMGs. That's actually awful. Really bad. But that's mitigated somewhat by the fact that the fire rate is really slow. So, coupled with a slow fire rate, it doesn't actually climb that bad, despite the very high vertical recoil. As you can see, all the other ones are like 0.28, 0.38, 0.33, 0.25. They're like less than half the upwards of recoil of the Chauchat. And speaking of recoil, the next stat is the horizontal left and right recoil of the weapon. Now that's much better, a much more respectable 0.22, which I believe is better than a couple of the weapons. It's better than Madsen and the MG15. The Lewis gun is better at 0.17, and the Hewitt has an insanely accurate 0.08 for horizontal recoil. The Hewitt is an anomaly, that is very accurate. So the horizontal recoil for the Chauchat is pretty good. It's worth noting at this stage that I didn't include recoil decrease on this table, because the recoil decrease is actually the exact same for all 5 of these weapons. It's 10, whereas all the other LMG variants are 6. Just in case you didn't know, the low-weight variants are basically the factory variants in all the other classes. They recover from recoil and spread faster. Now we move on to spread values, both aim down sight spread and hipfire spread. This is the next 4 stats. Now this is where shit gets complicated and interesting, just in case it's not already interesting. Now the very first stat, which I've just called spread, is aiming down sight while you're stood still. Now as you can see, the number is 0.24, which is joint highest, but don't get discouraged. It's joint highest, but it's still pretty damn good. Don't let that discourage you whatsoever. You will find very little difference between this and the other LMGs in terms of spread when you're stood still. So while it's the highest, it's perfectly fine. Next is the spread while you're moving. It's 0.56, and it's a different story because that is the joint best spread. So when you're moving, the spread is better than all the other LMGs, but when you're stood still, it's joint worse than all the other LMGs, conversely. Another way to think of it is that if you're in a gunfight, you're aiming down sight, firing, and you're strafing, so you're moving, you actually have an advantage compared to the other LMGs because it's more accurate. Anyway, moving on to hip fire when you're still and hip fire when you're moving. I'll show these at the same time. This is where shit shines, because the Chauchat, and you'll probably see this in a lot of the gameplay in the background. The hip fire is accurate as fuck. For such a slow firing weapon, I am getting so many hip fire kills up close. The values are 1.5 when you're still and 2 when you're moving. Now, those are minimum values. There are maximum values, which I'm not going to include on the screen because it's the minimum ones which are the most important. 1.5 and 2, and the rest are 2, 2.75, 1.5 and 2.25, 2.5 and 3.25, that's awful, and 2 and 2.75. All the other hip fires, the Madsen comes close with the same minimum when you're stood still, but when you're moving, all of them do not compare to the Chauchat. It is an excellent weapon to hip fire up close. If you haven't hip fired it much, I seriously suggest you give it a go. Now, the final two stats on the screen are very relevant to LMGs, and they are confusing. Well, they're confusing to me, so I'm going to try and break it down. As you may know, LMGs uniquely get more accurate the longer you fire. So spread actually improves after each shot, whereas with all other weapons, the spread gets worse after each shot. And that is why all the values you can see now in spread increase, that's why they're all negative. For any other weapon type, it's positive and the spread gets worse, because it's negative, the spread gets lower and lower. And the values are sort of irrelevant, really. I mean, they're just random numbers. Minus 0.106, and I believe that's actually the best, tied with the Hewitt and the Madsen. It gets a bit worse for the Lewis and even worse for the MG15. Now, breaking the trend, the last stat, spread decrease, is the length of time it takes, right, okay, for the weapon spread to return back to its normal base value. Now, as I just explained, because of the backwards nature of LMG spread, the longer the better, because it means it remains accurate for longer. In other words, you want the spread decrease for LMGs to last as long as possible, so here, the larger the number, the better. Whereas, again, with any other weapon type, you want the spread to decrease as fast as possible. So normally, a lower number would be better, but you want the highest number for LMGs. And for the Chauchat, it is 12.75, along with the Hewitt 12.75. Now, the best here is the Lewis gun with 15.3. The spread decrease lasts for a long time with that, which is excellent. The next is the MG15 with 8.95, and then finally the Madsen, which is really shit, is 6.375. So the Madsen goes back to its normal spread much faster. So the Chauchat does very good in this category. It's got a decent 12.75, so that's good for the Chauchat. Anyway, that's enough stats. I've seen too many stats today. Let's move on to the summary, the pros and the cons, and if you've skipped straight to the summary, hello and welcome to the video. This time let's keep it nice and in order, let's do all the pros and then all the cons. The first pro, and the biggest pro in my opinion, is it has an absolutely huge damage. It's a 3-shot kill up close, and it has a 5-shot kill past 40 meters. To put that in perspective, the Chauchat's minimum damage is the exact same as all the other LMG's maximum damage, so it does a huge damage. The next pro, it has the best empty reload time, but not the best reload time with bullets left. Although it is still good, so it has a very good reload time, generally speaking. Next, it has a very good horizontal recoil value. It's better than all the other LMGs except for the Hewitt, which is a unique anomaly. That has an insanely good horizontal recoil. So that's great. Next, the Chauchat has the best first shot recoil multiplier, which definitely, in my opinion, contributes towards making sort of tap firing a good idea at medium ranges with the Chauchat. Now on to the next strength, and this is, again, actually, I suppose the huge damage is the biggest pro, but this is another big pro. It has the best hipfire accuracy of all the low-weight LMGs. Win! Now the next strength, seriously, there's a lot of strengths and pros for this weapon. The Chauchat is so awesome! It has the best moving spread value, so the best spread while you're sort of strafing and moving, and you're aiming. But, unfortunately, when you're stood still, the spread, while obviously still better than when you're moving, it becomes much worse compared to the other low-weight LMGs. So in my opinion, this is the best LMG to sort of tap and burst fire while you're strafing. And in reality, that is what you do most of the time, so that's a very good thing. Now the next and last pro, it has a very good spread decrease value. As I explained earlier, this is for people who sort of skipped straight to the summary. Basically, spread decrease for LMGs is unique in that spread gets more accurate the longer you fire an LMG. So you want that extra accuracy to last as long as possible. So the longer the time for spread to decrease for LMGs, the better. Whereas for any other weapon type, you want the spread to decrease as fast as possible, basically. And the Chauchat has a decent length of spread decrease, which is a very good thing. Now, onto the cons. And keep in mind that the pros and cons of a weapon very often balance each other out. So while I'm just about to list a bunch of cons, and some of them are quite bad, a lot of them are mitigated or outright just eliminated by the pros. So keep that in mind. The first con, and the best example of what I just said, is the fact that it has an awful rate of fire. In fact, it happens to be the exact same rate of fire as the auto-loading 8 in the medic class. So for an automatic LMG, this is a very slow fire rate. But in my opinion, that's mitigated by the fact that it does such a huge amount of damage. Now the next con is the fact that it has the joint lowest mag size, joint with the BAR. But it shoots almost half the speed of the BAR, so it lasts for much longer. So a low mag size is forgivable in this circumstance. It doesn't make much of a difference if it fires for longer. Do you see what I mean? Now, the next con is important, and it is sort of central and pivotal to playing well with this weapon, and that's the fact that it has the highest vertical recoil of all the low-weight LMGs. The upwards movement is pretty bad, even with the slow fire rate. So this is definitely a gun you should consider firing in sort of bursts or even single shots. For medium to long ranges, of course. I mean, as with all LMGs, as I've said twice now, that the spread gets better the longer you fire. But there's a certain point where, even with the increasing sort of accuracy, the recoil is just too high for sustained fire. So I recommend that you forget about the accuracy mechanic of LMGs when it comes to longer ranges, and just treat it like an assault rifle and sort of burst fire. Unless you've got your bipod down, in which case just ignore what I'm saying, because that makes it very accurate, even automatic. I mean, when it comes to close and medium range, it's a different story, because as I've said, the hip fire is so damn accurate that at very close ranges, I just hip fire now anyway with a Chauchat. And at sort of close to medium, you can still, it's close enough that you can still fire automatic. Anyway, next con, the last con. I don't believe I listed this in the stats either. It has the lowest muzzle velocity of all the LMGs. This isn't as big a deal compared to the other cons in this list because it's not bad, it's just lower than all the other low-weight LMGs. And with an LMG, velocity really doesn't matter. As long as it's not really awful, then it doesn't matter, to be honest. Velocity only really matters when it comes to sniper rifles. Anyway, those are all the pros and cons. My opinion is that this is a high-skill weapon, it really is. And when played correctly and well, you're going to get some fantastic scores, but it has a high risk of you sucking bad. To play well with this weapon, you need to land most of your shots. It has an absolutely massive damage, but it shoots so slow that if you're missing half your shots, you're going to be dead before you can get a kill. So in my opinion, this weapon is a huge sort of test of your accuracy, and a great general sort of teaching tool to help you get better with your accuracy at the same time. I also think that the hip fire, despite the slow fire rate, is actually exceptional for a light machine gun, to the point where I actually advise that you purposefully hip fire enemies at close range encounters. It really is that good. Now don't forget, this is something that I actually learned yesterday. I mean, I can't believe I haven't tried it before, but when you put a bipod down, the accuracy, even when hip firing, i.e. you're not aiming down sight, if you're using the bipod, it's still very, very accurate. I don't know if it's as accurate as when you're aiming down sight with a bipod, but it is very accurate. I put this bipod down, like if there's an enemy close by, I go prone and just hip fire with the bipod. It's very, very accurate. It's as accurate as if you're aiming, in my opinion. So definitely try that out. Go prone and just start hip firing your enemies. You'll see how very, very accurate it is. It's excellent. So yeah, that is my official Liquid Blitz conclusion of the Chauchat. High skill, high damage, high accuracy required to play well, and a great weapon for improving your accuracy at the same time, and great hip fire as well. Both the low weight and the telescopic, I should point this out, low weight and telescopic versions both have the same hip fire. They're both just as accurate. And actually, I would say that's actually a strength, even more so for the telescopic variant, the fact that it has such a good hip fire, because that leaves you with a telescopic sight for long ranges and hip fire for close ranges, whereas the iron sights, I mean, that's a bit of the iron sights are best of both worlds, really. So the fact that the hip fire is so accurate gives the telescopic version a much better sort of close range defense, if you see what I mean. Because telescopic sights aren't exactly great for close ranges. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Like this video if you liked it, like this video if you didn't like it, and join me in my next video. The next one, I haven't decided yet. Should it be the medic weapon or the sniper or the shotgun? Medic. I'm going to do the medic weapon next because I like the medic class and I want to use the RSC 1917. So join me then.